So Minato is by far one of my favorite characters in the series. I consider myself a low-key semi-Minato tard. So this video is going to be pretty interesting for me to do, honestly. So Minato versus the Five Kage. And when I say Minato versus the Five Kage, I obviously mean a live Hokage Minato, not Edo KCM Minato, because for obvious reasons, that would just be a wipe. I think it's really interesting to do this as a live Hokage Minato to see how he would fare against the Five Kage. The Five Kage in specific who fought Madara, just in case we need to get that clear. So I was just pitched to this idea by somebody, and honestly, I think it's pretty good fight to cover. So I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't covered it yet, honestly, being a semi low-key Minato tard, as I said earlier. So today, that's what we're going with, Minato versus Five Kage. So let's go. So first, real quick, we're going to have to, or I'm going to have to really run down the list real quick to list on what the Kage could do in a match like this. We'll cover Mei real quick, the Mizukage. Now, unfortunately for Mei, she kind of has the bad luck or, misfortune of kind of getting clowned on when it comes to Five Kage versus battle videos, mainly because she's like the weakest link. Now, that's not to say Mei is weak by any means. She's a really capable fighter, but when it comes to the other four Kage, they just have a little more strength and versatility to them that make them more useful in certain fights. This one in particular as well. She will kind of remain the same. Her long range lava style and water style, they'll probably just be used for distractions at the very least. I don't really see them actually being able to hit Minato. But something that I did think about earlier that I thought of that she could do. This is if she can do it. If. Like, I want to emphasize the if on that. If she's quick enough to utilize this, then I actually could see it working. Now, her vapor style is mainly used as an area of effect attack. She releases a cloud of vapor into a room or an area, and whoever's in proximity to it gets melted. That she won't be able to release a cloud of it, safely, depending on how far or how close the Kage are to her, without injuring them in the process. But what she can do is, if Minato is successful in marking her by flying Raijin, and if he attempts to blitz her by using said Raijin, what she can do if she is quick enough is spit acid in Minato's face the same way she did against Zetsu when he was like literally just inches away from her face. Being that it's Minato, I don't see that working, as often, or maybe not at all. Minato's pretty slippery and he's fast, so his reaction time, I can see his reaction time being capable enough to just avoid that altogether. But if he's not really aware of what she can do, or doesn't have too much knowledge on the other Kage aside from Tsunade and the Raikage specifically, then he can get himself caught, lacking. Like I said, I don't see that happening more often than not. But if she is able to get acid on his face, I mean, however strong Minato is, I don't know if he can really survive against acid being spat right in his face. So I'm not trying to hype her up too much, but I do think that's like the only thing that she really can be used for outside of distracting with her water style and lava style, like I said earlier. Going on to the Raikage. Now, Raikage, we obviously know that he fought Minato to a stalemate in the Third Great Ninja War. And obviously you can assume, rightfully, that Minato got stronger, from the Third Great Ninja War to his Hokage days. But at the same time, I imagine the Raikage did too. I mean, like one of the first scenes we ever see of the Raikage is him just lifting weights casually in his office. So it's safe to say this guy trains on the daily. Well, I can assume that, the difference in power and overall stats between Minato and the Raikage is probably still the same, as it was in the Third Great Ninja War. Maybe you can, argue that Minato in that time span also learned how to use Sage Mode, so it puts him a bit more above than what he was in the difference. But that said, it's probably still going to remain the same, if not, a little bit in more favor of Minato as far as overall stats go. Meaning that the Raikage can probably still put pressure enough, at least decent enough to be a distraction, because the Raikage is still pretty fast. And when he fought Minato, he seemed pretty confident that he'd be able to get to Minato's flying Raijin kunais, at his top speed. I mean, the only reason why he wasn't able to was because Minato marked B. Like, he didn't even think that he marked B. So when it comes to the kunais in specific, maybe the Raikage can get to Minato when he teleports to the kunais. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but the fact that the Raikage seemed pretty confident that he'd be able to get to Minato, confidence alone doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying it does, just saying it's out there. Now the likelihood, that working if he does mark the other Kage, if the Raikage is not aware of it, could play out the same way as it did with B. Going on to Oniki, obviously Oniki is like the battlefield remover of the group. Just use particle style, but getting a particle style on Minato is going to be very much easier said than done. We see, characters like Obito, for example, just come in completely off screen without even a showing of Kamui, like the Kamui portal, and just grab Sasuke and get out of there before they're both disintegrated. Again, just completely off screen, off panel. I imagine Minato is going to be the same thing, especially if he has kunai's backpacking in his pouch or whatever and just thrown across the battlefield. Yeah, I imagine he getting a particle style beam or a particle style box on Minato is not going to happen. But what Oniki can do, aside from that, is he can pretty much make his allies faster or stronger depending on how he uses them, whether he makes them lighter or heavier. The Tsunade could probably help making her lighter. I don't really know if that would affect her punches at all, but if it did, it probably wouldn't be too bad of a case because she's still a crazy tank. So even if her strength is minimized even just a little bit because of her being lighter, I'm sure if she's able to actually hit Minato, he's done for. So, and obviously the Raikage for obvious reasons because his speed's going to be even more crazy and actually might help a lot more when it comes to tagging Minato, when it comes to teleporting his kunais. And if he's able to make the Raikage heavier at impact, it's going to do even more damage. Likely, arguably, as much as Tsunade does with a basic punch. Oniki's no joke, and something that I think that most people do tend to forget in the fight against Madara, Oniki was fast enough to get the Raikage out of the line of fire from Madara's Susanoo. Like whenever Madara got the Raikage caught in a Genjutsu, he was about to, hit him, and Oniki got the Raikage out of the way beforehand. So I think it's actually pretty impressive. He could do the same thing with the other Kage. If he can't really use the particle style, he's going to have to remain as a type of support for the 5 Kage in this case. So I can see him doing that as well. Going on to Gaara for obvious reasons. Gaara has probably the best range of the Kage. His Sand's pretty, can travel pretty far, obviously. And I will say that Gaara's speed, as far as his Sand is concerned, is actually pretty slept on. Now, what I'm about to say might sound like a crazy Gaara wank, but just keep in mind that it's actually pretty impressive. The 5 Kage Summit arc, Gaara was able to block the Raikage's kick on Sasuke before he actually made contact with the Inferno style. And just like in the split second, obviously we're assuming that the Raikage is going at full speed here. Yeah, that's crazy impressive. Not to mention, just a couple panels later, Gaara was able to block an Amaterasu being shot at him by Sasuke. So if you really wanted to get down to it, Gaara's Sand could be as fast as the Raikage. I mean, we saw the Raikage was fast enough to avoid an Amaterasu blitz from Sasuke as well. Without trying to wank Gaara's Sand too much, I'd say that his Sand's reaction time is probably on par with the Raikage. And I don't think that's being too generous because, again, just from what we saw, his Sand does a pretty good job at full speed. So I could see if, Minato does mark any of the Kage or Gaara specifically with Flying Raijin, maybe if Minato attempts to blitz any one of them, Gaara could be fast enough to defend them. Like, I don't think that's really unreasonable. It just depends, without any dojutsu, Gaara may not have, the perception needed to figure out which Kage he's going to blitz to, but I just think it's worth bringing up. Other than that, especially if Oniki does make Gaara's Sand lighter, what he could do, especially if they're in an area with around a bunch of sand, what he could do is make the area of sand lighter while not really affecting Gaara's Sand in his gourd. That way, he doesn't have to worry about the sand in his gourd being used for catching Minato. He can just use that for straight defense if he needs to and just worry about the Sand being fast enough to try to catch Minato. That's all I'm saying. I just think that Gaara's Sand is pretty busted when it comes to speed. Tsunade, Tsunade's self-explanatory. 100 healings, the healer of the group, a tank, incredible chakra reserve. Again, if she is able to land just one punch on Minato, he's done for. And conversely, Aside from Reaper Death Seal, I don't think there's anything in Minato's arsenal that is going to be capable of just outright shutting Tsunade down. Like, personally. Maybe like a Sage Art Rasengan could do some decent damage, but I don't think that's going to be enough to actually kill her. Much less even severely damage her. I mean, I'm sure it will severely damage her, but nothing that she can't like heal from. Especially if she's in 100 healings. She was chopped in half by Moderate and still survived. So if that doesn't tell you anything, again, aside from Reaper Death Seal, I don't think Minato can really do much. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to what Minato can do, obviously Minato can just play the cat and mouse game against the 5 Kage. He can use anything from his kunais to his pouch, rocks or something that he can, use to his advantage on placing a flying Raijin mark on them to help evade attacks, or the Kage themselves. I'm not saying it's it's Minato. I've said this a whole bunch of times in past videos that whenever Minato attempts to mark somebody, they get marked. I mean, we've seen this multiple times, where it's Minato versus B in the Raikage, Minato versus Obito, or even Minato versus Kakashi in the OVA scenes in the Ninja Storm Generations game. Same thing. Every time he attempts to mark somebody, he marks them. Now, like I said earlier, if he does attempt to mark them and he succeeds, the Kage do have slight ways of countering it. Not guaranteed, because again, Minato's pretty fast. So, but the Raikage, out of all the Kage that I feel like he won't mark, I'm sure the Raikage is him. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to mark the Raikage. If he is, I don't really, I don't know if a Rasengan can just shut the Raikage down. Maybe a Sage Art Rasengan could probably do the job, but again, if Tsunade is still on the field, she could just heal him. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed wipe, but if he's able to mark Onuki, I think Onuki's another one that I just don't see him being able to mark so easily because Onuki can fly. So I think him not being marked is a safe bet. I'm not saying it's not at all possible, but again, getting Onuki marked is gonna be tough. Now, what I will say is that even with Onuki's ability to fly, it may or may not matter, because Minato can just throw a flying Raijin Kunai in his direction in the air and just teleport behind him and just hit him with a Rasengan or something like that. We've seen him do that in the Storm games, one of his ultimate moves, so he can do something similar if he wanted to. The only counter to that I would say is if Onuki is quick enough to perceive something like that, which I don't think, more often than not, I don't think he'll be able to, but let's just say he would be able to. Then he could just use the heavy boulder jutsu on Minato and increase his weight and make him slower. So at the very least to, avoid that blitz attempt from Minato. Gaara is going to be tough too, because of his incredible speed of sand and defense. It'll be kind of tough to get, especially if he's with the range of his sand. It's going to be kind of hard to get in close to Gaara, especially with the other 4 Kage mounting an assault at the same time. So Mei and Tsunade are pretty much the only ones that I can definitively say will get marked. The problem is with Tsunade in specific, even if he does mark her, again, there's not much that Minato has in his arsenal aside from his Sage Art Rasengan that's going to be able to, shut Tsunade down. And I feel like Minato, of all people, will probably be aware of that too. He probably already knows how much of a tank Tsunade is. Unless he cuts her head off, that's the only thing I can say. That's fair. That is fair. I will give it that. I guess I was just kind of operating on the assumption that Minato wouldn't go for killer intent. But if the gloves are off, especially if it's a 1v5, the gloves are gonna have to be off. Then yeah, she gets her head cut off, then by all means she can't survive from that. But if that's not the case, say, like I said earlier, if either the Raikage can get to Tsunade before Minato gets a decisive blow in, or Gaara does the same thing, then Minato just can't, get the killing blow. Mei is probably a no-brainer, obviously, if she gets marked. And again, if the Raikage or Gaara aren't fast enough to get to her in time to help her, that she's done for. I just can't see Minato being able to. Again, he'll probably have to just play the cat and mouse game until he picks them off one by one. With everybody knowing who they're fighting, I honestly feel like the best course of action for them is to stay close to each other. Again, if they're operating on the assumption that they'll get marked at some point, then the best thing they could do is be close enough to each other to defend against the blitz attempt from Minato. That's just my headcanon. I'm not saying the 5 Kage would act that way. I just feel like that's like the safest bet. And again, being that you have characters like the Raikage and Gaara, whose speed, with their utility, pretty good as far as defending goes. Again, same thing with Oniki. If, he can get them out of the way with his Earth style or whatever, the same way he did with the Raikage against Madara. If like they're all behind, like they all have their backs facing towards each other and, Minato attempts to blitz someone from behind, Mei can turn around and spit acid. I'm just saying, like, I'm kind of like picture of like how Minato could take the win, and it really is gonna have to play a cat and mouse game and teleporting until he can pick them off one by one. But again, I guess depending on how close they are to each other, it's gonna be a lot easier said than done. What I can say for Minato though, is that him being an expert in sealing ninjutsu, maybe he can get a seal on each of the Kage and get him off the field that way. I feel like the ones that will definitely go down to that are Mei and Tsunade, being that they're not, they don't have anything that could really combat, Minato's speed all that much. If he tries to do that the Raikage, I feel like the Raikage will be fast enough to avoid that. Oniki, like I said, it will probably be in the air for the most part of the fight. Gaara's sand will probably be a bit of a detriment to Minato getting a seal on him. So Tsunade and Mei are probably the ones that are going to get marked with the seal. Mei is probably a no-brainer as far as getting sealed and taking off the fight. Tsunade, I don't know. I don't really know if there's a seal that's capable of just keeping Tsunade down. I'm fully willing to believe that there is, especially since Minato is, again, an expert in sealing ninjutsu. But like I said, it's definitely on the table. In essence, Minato doesn't just dash at people. He needs to mark them first before that. So no mark might equal no blitz. And he isn't fighting them individually either. It's a completely different ball game when you're fighting them all together. And to be honest, the only one that's really vulnerable to Minato's style of fighting, as far as the Flying Raijin, is Mei, at least among the 5. With the Raikage, he might be safe with his lightning armor. The fact that the Raikage is still alive after fighting Minato many times tells me that Minato couldn't kill him, and vice versa. Minato does also have the summoning jutsu, which definitely could be helpful. Summoning Gamabunta would definitely help in a situation like this. But it's arguable because, Katsuyu might be able to get rid of him by shooting her acid at him. Gaara might actually be able to seal Gamabunta in a pyramid or something like that. But, with that being the case, it could land a distraction for Gaara or whatever for Minato to be able to take him out. As well as if Minato can summon Ma and Pa. I'm not sure if he would do that. We've never really seen him do something like that, but there's nothing saying that he can't. And if he does, Frog Song could definitely play a huge part in this fight. Frog Song could really distract the Kage, and Minato could use that to his advantage to either cut one of the Kage's head off or just actually seal any one of them or all of them. So I definitely do see it pretty tough in the Kage's favor as well. Something that I did forget to mention, though, is Gaara, along with Oniki, can fly. Also, Minato will at least need to have 2 markers to even land a hit on Gaara. One to bait the defense, and the other to land a hit. Not to mention, Gaara will be in pretty decent range from Minato. And with Gaara being there as well, he can help the Kage with helping them to fly as well, creating little islands of sand for each one of them to get on to avoid Minato's attacks. Mei is vulnerable, for sure, but remember, they're all working together. So imagine how Gaara had Oniki in the War Arc with the island of sand, but for Mei instead. Something that I did forget to mention, though, about the summon is that Minato can use a summoning jutsu, like Summon Gamabunta or any of the other, large-scale toads. But the problem is that they're going to be big old targets for Oniki. Pretty much like target practice for Oniki. Oniki got rid of all 25 of the wood clone Susanos with particle style alone. Something else that I did forget, though, is that I was kind of low-key semi-clowning on lava style earlier, but she can use that as an area effect attack, where she covers the area with lava style. That might hinder Minato's mobility a little bit. Maybe not much, but it could be helpful. Like I said earlier, it's a completely different ball game when all of the 5 of them working together. Gaara and Mei can cover a huge area with their attacks, limiting the FTG spam. Gaara can keep both Mei and Tsunade in the air, which, Tsunade may not even need to. And Oniki just kind of counters his summons, and the list kind of goes on. Outside of that, though, I'm not really sure what Minato can do to take the win, just because I feel like The five Kage's teamwork is so on point. I mean, like I said, they were able to combat, and honestly, their durability, each of their durability is actually nothing to scoff at. I will say that. You know, I will, like, obviously, like, if Sage Art Rasengan is going to do the job well against certain ones like Mei and Oniki and Gaara if he's able to hit him. But, for example, Mei took a point blank fist from one of Madara's Susanoo, and she was still fighting. And she took that fist after she'd already been fighting them already for a decent amount of time. Like, assuming that all the other Kage are stronger or more durable than she is, I don't know. It might take a few Rasengans to take each one of them out individually. So
now, in all fairness, with all that said, even with the Raikage speed being amped by Onoki, it's more than likely possible that Minato's speed outrivals him, because, I mean, we saw, in my personal opinion, the best feat for Minato as far as speed goes was being able to get all the True Secret orbs out of the line of fire when 8th Gate Guy was about to speed blitz Madara's True Secret orb. Obviously, Minato's speed still outmatches the Raikage, but I will say that the enhanced speed in conjunction with all the other Kage's abilities might still be able to put pressure on this Minato. Now, don't misunderstand me, y'all. I'm not saying these problems on their own are tough for Minato to deal with. I'm just saying all these problems that are consisting, like Gaara-san, Oniki's ability to make the Raikage lighter and faster or stronger and heavier, Mei's acid spit, Tsunade's punches, the Raikage's speed and possibly enhanced speed by Onoki, all these together in conjunction with one another just add a little bit more frustration to Minato.
And when it comes to Sage Mode, like, my headcanon is that he is really good at utilizing Sage Mode. It's just he's not effective enough with it to maintain it for too long. And I think there's a good evidence for that. You know, case in point, the Ten Tails Madara scene. You know, Minato's a meticulous guy. He's smart. He doesn't make careless moves really ever. So I don't really see him thinking that, like, I don't think that Minato would have attempted to attack Madara with a Sage Art Rasengan if he didn't at least think it would do something. Same case here. Like, I don't think he'd resort to using Sage Mode if he really didn't feel like it would help. And I think it will. I just don't know how long he'll be able to use it for. You know, if he isn't able to use it for too long enough to take any of the Kage out, which I do think he could. I'm not trying to say this is a one-sided stomp in the Kage's favor. I do think he's able to take some of the Kage out. Realistically, the one that he does take out definitively, it will probably be Mei, for sure. But the thing is that, I don't know, like, again, Onoki's going to be in midair for most of the fight, so getting a blow on him is going to be tough. Gaara-san, you know, whether it's him defending himself or the other Kage is going to be pretty tough. The Raikage, for obvious reasons, he's gonna add some pressure for Minato himself. And Tsunade just has so much durability in her arsenal. It's really tough for her to go down to, you know, a basic Rasengan or even a Sage Mode Rasengan. So, and again, if they are in close proximity to each other, they can watch each other's backs, you know. So now Minato can make shadow clones, but I don't know if he'd be able to make 5 each and for them to be able to get the job done again, like I said, especially if the clones scale lower to the original. I don't know. I honestly don't want to like rant too much, but I think I'd probably give this one to the Kage. Another thing too is, like, when I go back to the cat and mouse game that Minato can play, it might just come down to a war of attrition. Like, if he's able to stay on the defensive long enough for them to run out their chakra, but doing so against all the 5 Kages can be really tough. I said they were able to survive in a long enough fight against Madara plus his wood style clones. So, I don't know. I don't really see Minato winning in a battle of attrition either, especially against ones like Tsunade and the Raikage specifically. So, I mean, I'm gonna have to give this one to the Kage like 7 out of 10 times. But yeah, that's going to be the video. Thank you all for watching all the way to the end. If you have, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please let me know if I'm just overhyping the Kage. I just feel like they have too much teamwork and, you know, utility in their arsenals altogether for them to go down to Minato. I do feel like Minato can take this fight. He would have to be really lucky and really divisive in his attacks, which it is Minato. I do think it is possible. And his intellect can't be ignored either. I will say that. Like, Minato is smart. So I can imagine him being able to devise a strategy to be able to beat them. But honestly, I just feel like all the 5 Kage are like too tanky for someone like Minato. But that's gonna be it for the video, guys. Thank you all for watching all the way to the end if you have. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for more notifications. And until the next one, Lightning Blade out.